So I am Brad Roy. I serve as the chair on the CCRB for the clinical exercise certification. Not with us tonight is Michael Lynch. Michael is the chair of the RSET committee as well. And then here with me is Grace DeSimone. Grace chairs our group exercise subcommittee. And then Penny Steen, who chairs our CBT committee, and then Ben Thompson, who chairs our exercise physiology committee. So we've got a great group of people here, and then I'll try to keep up with them if I can. So we have some slides and some things we want to just present to you and talk to you about a little bit with the scope of practice, and then we really want to open it up at the end and get some conversation going and make sure that we kind of address the things and the reasons for you being here tonight. So we'll try to plow through this, and I promise we won't go past 8 o'clock. So when we talk about professional credentialing, there's two pieces that I think really are important for you to know. First of all, certification is something that's voluntary, it's self-regulated, where licensure is something that's required, and it's government regulated. And usually there's a committee that at the state or national level that oversees those licensing exams and the things that happen with that. So for example, on the certification side, we have things like our ACSM certifications or what ACE might have. The Medical Fitness Association has a facility certification. Those are all voluntary things that organizations have put together. They met some criteria, and then there's also certifications out there that haven't done that kind of work. And you can pay your $1 or $2 and get your certification, hang it on the wall, and do whatever you want to do. On the licensure side, you have certainly things like physicians, athletic training, physical therapy, dietetics, medicine, nursing. All of those areas require a license to do the things that they do. If you don't have that license and you do it, you really put yourself at a lot of risk. And then on the certification side, and even on the licensure side, they can be accredited. So there's an extra step that an organization can go through and really make sure that their certification and it really has a lot of oomph to it, has a lot of meaning and stuff, and a lot of value for those that are going to get it. And Ben's going to go a little bit more into how those pieces are developed. So with ACSM, most of you are aware, we have our group exercise instructor. In order to be certified in this area, you have to be at least 18 years of age, have a high school diploma or the equivalent of that, and have your adult CPR and AED. Sort of the next level then is our personal trainer. Once again, it's that 18-year age, high school diploma, the same CPR and AED requirement. Then we start stepping up into our ACSM certified exercise physiologist, which requires a bachelor's degree. So we really feel that as we start getting to this level, that degree is really, really important. So we require that degree for that certification. And then, of course, their CPR and EED is true across our certifications. And then our certified clinical exercise physiologist, which is also at the bachelor's degree and is primarily working with people with cardio and metabolic diseases. And then the RSEP is at a master's level, and that's working out there with a whole variety of different types of patient populations that are there. So those are the certifications that we have for ACSM, and Ben's going to come up and just talk a little bit about what goes into developing a certification.
Thank you. So it's actually kind of important to have a good understanding of what goes into creating a certification. It's not just some magical thing that we come up with and you can take an exam and pay some money and go out and train. So there are some very important steps that we go through to make sure that the certification is appropriate for whoever it is that you're going to be working with. So are you going to be working with a diseased population? Are you going to be working with a healthy population? What are going to be the educational requirements? Can you have just a high school degree, or do you need a bachelor's degree or a graduate degree to be working with these populations? And then what are they going to do? So what's their job? What can they do? I know probably I'll be talking a little bit more about the exercise physiologist. We can work with healthy populations. We can also work with populations that have controlled disease, okay? You know, we can't work with somebody that has an uncontrolled disease. That's beyond our scope of practice. So, you know, who can these people work with and what it is can they do? Once we have that job description, we generate these things called domains. And domains are these general content competencies that we're looking to make sure that if somebody takes this certification, they have understanding in these specific domains. And again, sorry, just because I'm for EPC, these are the specific domains that the exercise physiologist has. So health fitness assessment, we're expecting you to know information on, exercise prescription and implementation, counseling, behavior change, legal, and then a little bit of management as well. So you have to have competency and knowledge to understand the content in these domains to be able to pass the certification and to be successful in whatever it is that you're going to do. So once we have figured out these domains, what we do is we send them out for validation. And some of you that are certified may have gotten a survey from ACSM asking you to give us feedback about these specific domains. You know, are they appropriate to what you do in your work or place of employment? Or, you know, do we need to change this specific domain or what's under this domain? So you give us feedback, we have content experts as well, and we revise each of these domains based on that feedback. So we're getting what's going on right now in the field that's current, okay? So we get that feedback, we make changes, and then we validate them. So they're validated. So we send them back out again to other people through a survey, and they say, yes, this is what we do in our job, or no, this is not what we do in our job. So it's very important to go through those, and once we have our domains, we come up with the specific skills and knowledge that you have to be able to be competent in that domain. Okay, so for like exercise assessment, you need to be able to take a blood pressure, know what cough sounds are, and things like that. So it's important to be able to understand what those knowledge and skills are. So this is something called a job task analysis. So we're looking to see, you know, what job people do and what tasks they're doing in their daily job. So that's awesome. You know, we've done this. We've gone through all this great survey information. We've come up with these domains and these jobs and tasks. What does it mean to you? Okay, so it makes that certification much more robust. And as Brad was talking about, it strengthens and goes through an accreditation process. So all of ACSM certification and GEI is pending are accredited through a kind of a third body organization called the Institute for Credentialing Excellence and the National Commission for Certifying Agencies. So this third body organization is there basically to make sure that, you know, what we're putting on our exams is appropriate for that level of certification. Okay, so it's going to enhance the credibility of that certification, and it allows you as a professional to tell your employer, you know, yeah, I've taken this certification. It's an accredited certification. So basically it's been checked out by, you know, a third party, and it makes it much more credible. So, you know, there are these steps that we go through when we create a certification, and it's not just a one-time thing. We do this annually to make sure that we're keeping up with the trends in the industry and to make sure that we're keeping up and making sure that the certification stays current. So I'll pass it on here to Grace real quick, and she'll talk about GEI.
Careful. You have to do a little acrobatics to come around. There you go. Thank you. Thanks. It's okay. So group exercise instructor scope. I'm going to just take a little detour for you. In all of the certifications that we have, you have the degreed as a minimum requirement, and then we have the non-degreed. So I always think of those, the ones that require a degree, that's sort of the equator, which is where Ben is sitting, and then you have below the equator those that do not require a degree, which is group exercise instructor, which I'll talk to you a little bit about, and then Penny's going to talk to you about certified personal trainer. So it's a place to understand, you know, where each of the certification lies. So when we talk about scope of practice and you think about what were the job task analyses for a group exercise instructor, would be very different from a job task analysis for a certified exercise physiologist. Would you take a blood pressure? Not required. Do you need to execute exercises well? Definitely required. So the interesting thing when we did the domains for group exercise, 55% of the domain landed in leadership. So it's a very, very unique characteristic of that particular certification. So when we talk about scope, you think about what things are required, and if you read this description, which I'm not going to read to you, this is what a group exercise instructor can do. There are many things that group exercise instructors do outside of this scope, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but sort of put that frame around it as you're thinking about it and you look at these words. They're working with somebody who's apparently healthy, those who don't have health challenges, they can move independently, and people that are working in a group. Now, when I think about group exercise, this is how when we were doing the job task analysis, we classified it this way. Could you do this for 100 people? Then it really separates itself from personal training, small group training. Can you do this activity times 100? And that would give you a lot of the answers. And I'm going to pass this over. Penny's going to talk to you a little bit about certified personal trainer, what's involved there, and then we're going to talk to you a little bit more about scope. She's going to do a balancing act too, because it's very narrow back there.
I don't think you're actually going to see me if I stand behind here. So this is way too...
I have a handheld for you.
No, it's fine. That's fine. I can step aside. You can all hear me, right? Yes. So this is an exciting time for me as the chair because we are... I'm going to be out of... Oh, it's all right. Got it. Chest. Oh, okay. I just feel like I should sing or something now. Okay, so, oh, and there's a penny right there. Face up.
And your name is?
Okay. All right, it's my lucky day. So, well, what I was going to say is it's a very exciting time for me right now as the chair of CPT. And that is because we are in the process of doing our job task analysis right now, like last week, sending out surveys. Maybe some of you have received the survey and have volunteered to help out, giving your feedback, and it's so appreciated. We really need to see what's going on, out there in the trenches, so to speak. That's what I call it, because that's where it all happens, right? And times change, so we can't say, some of the things that maybe we were doing in the past, we're either not doing anymore, or we have better tools to perform those particular, whatever they are, skills now. So things are just a little bit different. We want to keep those job tasks updated. So that's what we're in the process of doing, and again, appreciate your feedback. But we are working with apparently healthy adults and those who have been cleared to exercise. And is there a slide going? There it is. You already did it. Okay, thank you. So they've been cleared to exercise. One of the things that we ran into when we sent out the original survey and asking what does a CPT do? What are your tasks? We got a lot of things that seem to be representative of other areas, such as diet, prescription. Now, if we said, wait, is that our job, diet, prescription? Well, when we teased out some of that information, well, that person who answered the question also had a degree in another area. And so this is what we were really interested in teasing out. No, let's look at the credential for the CPT, and let's not consider other credentials, degrees in other areas. Because we did get some very specific answers that we thought, wow, that's not quite in the scope. So that's basically what I'm here to talk about and answer questions. And where are we going from here, folks?
We're going to Ben.
We're going back to Ben.
Okay, it's all right. And I'm back. All right.
You don't need that one.
I don't need that. Okay, so exercise physiologist. So, we can work with those individuals that have medically controlled diseases and that are healthy as well. So, I kind of feel that the EPC is kind of in the the middle. We have enough education that we're able to work with those that have medically controlled conditions and healthy conditions, but that's about as far as we can go. We're not able to, give dietary advice like Penny was talking, or work with individuals that have uncontrolled or at high risk. That's what the CEP and the RCEP are going to be working for. So, making sure that regardless of what your education is and what your real world experiences are, you still are bound to practice within whatever that scope is that we've defined. So medically controlled. So perform pre-exercise health assessments and physical fitness assessments. So we go through all these, and we did not necessarily recently, within the past I think 6 or 8 years, we did change it to a bachelor's degree in exercise science, physiology or kinesiology, where it used to be related degrees, which included nursing, physical therapy, OT, that type of stuff. So we really thought that making sure that the exam candidates had the background is really, really important in exercise science, because you need to know what the physiological responses are to understand what's going on when somebody is exercising. So that was kind of our reasoning behind changing it to exercise science only. And there's, if you go to the ACSM website, there are specific criteria and kind of coursework that we require as well to make sure that you qualify for this certification. Just like Penny said, we're going through the JTA process as well, so you're probably getting some of those surveys out. So again, we do appreciate your feedback and the help that you give, because a lot of this is driven by the feedback and the information that you give us. So I think Brad's going to talk a little bit about CEP here.
So I'll cover our 2 clinical certifications. First is our clinical exercise physiologist, which is at a bachelor's level. You can see the scope of practice that is there for them. They primarily work with people with cardiometabolic disease and disorders. So most of our clinical exercise physiologists are out there working in cardiac rehab programs. That's kind of the staple. We do have some people, though, that have branched out into other areas, into some of the neuromuscular areas as well and things, but they're working in systems where they have that support, they have the training and background to be able to do that. So that's really, really important, because there is a lot of gray areas between our 2 clinical certifications, and right now we're trying to sort out, and it's going to take a while to figure out in the future what we really want to do with those 2 certifications. And then the RCEP is our highest level. This requires a master's degree in the field of exercise science. Really, they're working with people with all different types of conditions, chronic health conditions, which is prevalent throughout our society today, and doing that independently. And I think doing a really good job with that. So that's kind of the highest level. The majority of them are also working in cardiac rehab as well. Some have branched out into diabetes and some other areas, but still the bulk between the 2 clinical certifications, most of those professionals are in that cardiopulmonary arena. But I think you're going to see more and more advancing in the future into these other areas. Both of those certifications have also been going through the job task analysis and getting lots of feedback from out in the field and refining some of the domains that we have with them. The committees are beginning to work together to look at the future. Do we want to come back to one clinical certification, or do we want to keep it 2 separate ones? We've gotten a lot of feedback from out in the field on that. We'll probably be reaching out for even more field feedback as we put some things together. So we're not going to change things overnight. It's going to be a long-range plan for doing that. So all of our certifications have a scope of practice, and that scope of practice really defines what that professional can do. As Penny and Ben mentioned, some of our professionals work a little bit outside of that scope because they have training to be able to do that in another domain, and so they can branch out, or they might be working under the direct supervision of a physician where they can do some things because they have that kind of
support. But by and large, it's really important to stay within that scope of practice. And so one of the challenges we have in our profession is, if you look out at our society, we have a zillion people out there with chronic health conditions. That's the majority of Americans today. So there's starts to be a lot of blurring of the lines when we start working with people out in the field. But we want to be careful not to creep outside of our scope, because it really opens you up to some real challenging situations that can occur. So crossing the line into a licensed practice really is conducting a practice that's defined by state licensure. That could be medicine, it could be counseling. We have this whole new area of health and wellness coaches. I just terminated one of our health and wellness coaches because that coach was actually diving down and doing counseling and getting very deep with those clients that that person was working with, way outside of their scope. They lost their job because of that. It could be nutrition, it could be branching into areas of physical therapy. It's really getting into those areas that are governed by licenses that are outside the scope of the certification and training that we have as professionals. So we have to be careful not to get into that situation of creep. And sometimes that's challenging because your clients you're working with start leading you down that path, and you have to kind of know when to stop. So when you do cross over that line, you put yourself at risk for a certain set of things. First of all is negligent conduct. This is really practicing beyond one's credential, and it leads to an injury. And there's some cases out there where a client has been trained that has a medical condition, and the person that was training them really didn't have the background and the understanding of that condition, and that person was injured or maybe even died. Okay, that person was negligent, and to say, well, I didn't know better, is not any defense in court. It won't stand up. When they bring that expert witness up, if you aren't able to meet the professional standard of care that is there for working with those people, you can be charged with negligence, and it could cost you a lot. And so certainly that's a real danger of creeping outside of that scope of practice. So in that, there's a couple of kinds of laws. There's the civil law or tort law, which really is applicable to the scope of practice. It's an infringement by one person of the legally recognized rights of another. And so negligence is certainly something that has to be proven that you were negligent, that you caused that harm. But if you breach that and you're found guilty by a judge, you may have to pay out some fairly heavy monetary damages. And there is cases out there where this has occurred. And then there's also criminal law. So this could be violation of a state or a federal statute, working into a license area that you don't have the license to doing that. So you're practicing medicine, you diagnosed what this person had, and you gave them a treatment that was not within the scope of what you were trained for, but it really takes a licensed provider to do that. If you're found guilty, it can range anywhere from a fine to imprisonment, which would not be something that's fun to go with. So, creeping outside that scope of practice is something that's very, very serious. It puts you at big risk for potential fines, all the way up to spending some time in jail with people you probably don't want to be around very much. So you really have to be careful not to get caught into that trap. So what are the ramifications then of creeping beyond that scope? I thought it would be fun to share a few case studies and some examples of what happens with that. I just shared one of the health and wellness coach that we terminated at our facility because they went outside of that. So that's a minor thing. They lost their job. It might be difficult to get another job in that field in the future, but there's also even steeper ones. So I think Penny and Grace are going to come up and share a few more thoughts.
Well, I thought I'd just take from my experience. So what I do is worksite health promotion. I'm a national group fitness director. I manage over 1,000 group exercise instructors, which is like herding drunken cats. So that's what people say, what do you do? And I say, I herd drunk cats. So examples from things that happen outside the scope. Now, what are we all? People pleasers. We love to please people. So when someone asks you a question, What do you want to do? You want to give them an answer. You don't want to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. It's outside my scope, right? And there's a very fine line. So when in doubt, if you're thinking, what can I do? Go back to your job task analysis. In your credentialing manual, or right online on the ACSM website, you will find the job task analysis, and it will list out every single thing that you should be able to do. If you're outside that scope, you'll know you're outside that scope. Can you talk to somebody about nutrition? Yes. Can you diagnose a prescriptive nutrition diet? No. So what happens in my world? In my world, I have group exercise studios, and I partner with physical activity specialists or exercise specialists. So those are the people who do the gym floor. We're in the studio. What happens? Where's my creep? The group fitness instructors go outside the studio. Let's run on the treadmill, because that's what's kind of happening in the world, right? And they see the boutique offering, so let's do that. So they send their people out, they're going to run on the treadmill. No one's monitoring them. They're running, full tilt on a treadmill. Who's turning it on? Who's turning it off? That's an accident waiting to happen. So we corralled them, please stay in your room. This is your room. Group exercise stays in your room. So what happens next? Now they take the equipment from the training floor and drag it into the studio. So we had a woman that got 2 broken fingers because some big guy used a medicine ball that was too large and appropriate for a group fitness setting, and she went to catch it and it came up with too much force and she broke 2 fingers. Where did the medicine ball come from? Oh, it came from the training floor. Again, so simple things like that wind up to minor disasters, but if you start thinking about, in my world, stay in your room, teach what's on the schedule. That is an issue that I'm constantly telling people, well, the members were bored and we were talking about it. That's great. Go to your manager, talk to your manager, and we'll change the schedule, but the expectation is set from what's listed on there. That is scope creep, because now, I came in for a class that was described this way and the instructor started doing other stuff. That's outside of that. That person got hurt because it was outside their expectation. Now you're in a situation that you don't want to be in. So those are some of the examples from my world, and I'm just going to bridge this gap, and then Penny, maybe you can come up and talk about this. I'm going to open Pandora's box for you. On the physical activity side, how many people are doing corrective exercise? Anybody? Have you all heard of corrective exercise, right? It's very popular right now, and personal trainers are offering corrective exercise, myofascial release. So I'm going to pass that. You guys stew on that while we're doing our balancing act.
Check.
And Penny's going to talk to you a little bit about that. Oh, look at you with that handheld mic.
I know, well, look at that. So I'll just tell you a story that I think it just really resonates, all of this. I was in Brazil, and I was teaching a workshop for trainers, and there was an individual who was sitting in this position here, this stretch, right? And the trainer sat right down on his back, and they said, "What do you think about this stretch?" Well, in the United States, we cannot sit on our clients, I said. Well, I only know a little Portuguese, so the interpreter did all of the, discussion, and everyone looked so puzzled. I said, in the United States, you see, if we did something that we're not supposed to do, that's an act of co-omission, we could get sued. Again, everyone looked so, puzzled. Said something to the interpreter, and the interpreter said to me, "Penny, the group would like to know why in the United States someone would sue you when you're trying to help them." It's the American way. So we really have to be careful, because we don't have license to touch. We do have to ask permission, which sometimes is a little creepy, but we do have to ask, and we have to be very careful. We have to get very good with our verbal skills when we're describing exercise. It's something to really work on. We always want to demonstrate, but to have an individual moving into positions and just work on our verbal skills is very, very important. Because remember, I mean, people, they could sue you for anything. Right? I was working in a fitness center. Someone had not been in the center for a long time. She came in, the staff member said, "Oh, it's so great to see you," and gave her a great big hug. She got served with papers later. Said she broke her rib. So you get sued for your own affections. You do have to be careful, right? Always ask. But the idea is, if we stay within the scope of practice, I mean, what will happen is we want to have an organization behind us to say, yes, you followed the standards of care. And that involves getting a really good understanding of what those standards are within the scope of the credential that you carry. And you may have others, but you have to recognize when you go and you start to use that as your credential, right? That's my story.
Okay, we're back to corrective exercise. Is anybody doing this now? Have you heard of this? Where you're giving people tools. Somebody comes and says, "Oh, I hurt my knee." And the trainer comes running out with a tennis ball, a foam roller, we'll foam here and do this and take this band and do this exercise, and it's going to make you feel better. And how do I know this? Because I am also the safety officer in my job, and I get all of the incident reports. And when we read them, every single one, we go all the way through, and it's very common for a trainer, all well-meaning. Everybody wants to help. Why shouldn't we be helping people? But they very frequently creep outside by making a diagnosis. "Oh, I think it's your meniscus." Really? How do you know? Those are things, and maybe you're right, but maybe you're wrong. And now you've put the idea in somebody's head. And because we're getting so smart, and because we have learned so many different kinds of therapies, and there's kind of a crossover now between therapy and exercise, like foam rolling. If you think about a lot of the tools that we use, a lot of them cross over from different therapies, like physio balls, right? A lot of those things came from a therapeutic background, but there's a place where it's appropriate and a place where it's not appropriate. So you always have to think, are you diagnosing? You have to catch yourself sometimes because you think, "Oh, that doesn't look so good," and see if this helps. You're trying to alleviate a pain or condition. Try this, see if this helps. If it doesn't, seek medical advice. Period, the end. You're not making a further diagnosis. And a lot of times, we want to sound smarter than we are, because it sounds good. I read the reports and the person stepped laterally and blah, blah, blah. They fell off the step sideways. That's all you need to tell me. I don't need anything else, but because everyone's trying to sound extra educated, we put a lot of extra verbiage in there. You have to be careful with that. So what I thought we'd do is open the floor up to you. What would you like to know? What questions do you have? And what challenges you on a day-to-day basis with the roles that you play?
Challenges me just places that they do facility opening in our town, and all this doesn't matter to them. I don't know, it's frustrating to be with ACSM for as many years as I have, and just to find people who believe in ACSM guidelines. It's hard to find those people who are the trainers in town who are selling isogenics and doing things. It's frustrating. We can't hear.
So the comment was about it's frustrating when you have other trainers who aren't following particular guidelines like this, or not staying within the scope. So as if people don't care. And I guess one way I would address that would be to say, do you care? We care. I care. So I can only control me, and if I'm in a position of management, I can set rules for the people I work with, and I can sleep at night because I feel like that's the right thing. But I think one of the things is, whenever you are addressing someone who says, they'll say, "Oh, I have a bad back." We don't know what that means. What do you mean? It doesn't behave? What is wrong? all we can do is we can try to keep people comfortable as they exercise. And if anything that we say sounds like a rehabilitative recommendation, we've gone beyond the scope. That's kind of the way, you know, it sounds like I'm trying to fix a problem. We've gone beyond the scope. And again, you know, we've learned, and I've learned this over years, that I can't control what other people do. You know, lived through a divorce. I know, right? You can't.
One of the things that a lot of health and fitness professionals are trying to do today is to get into medicine. Right? We're trying to work in the healthcare field, and we really feel that that's part of who we are and what we do. But one of the barriers to getting in that is earning the trust of those medical providers that are out there, those physicians. When people do things like you're talking about, I guarantee you they are not going to have much credibility with the medical world. And so then getting those referrals and the directions they want to go is going to be very, very challenging. So it's always important to take the high road and to do what is correct. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know, or this is outside my scope, but I know just the person you need to be meeting with or talking to, and make those referrals. That's how you build the confidence with the provider field that's out there, and you can begin to inch yourself or creep yourself into the whole medical realm where your skills are really needed. Exercise is medicine. We need lots of people that can help drive that forward. But if we don't have the credibility and we lose the trust of the medical community, it's not going to happen. So we have to overcome those people by staying the course and really earning that credibility from them.
Good segue too, Brett. Does earning any of the exercises medicine certificates, credentials on top of your primary certification, does that change or extend your scope of practice?
I don't think it extends your scope of practice, you know, because you're talking about a very small, narrow window of what you're doing to work with those clients and get them moving in that, and you still have any exercise prescription you might give them still stays within the scope of what you're able to do, and we try to put people into the right level of exercises medicine credential to be able to work with those types of clients that are referred to them. Exercises medicine credential is not very well known nationally or even internationally amongst the medical profession. There's a lot of work yet to be done to bring that forward. And lots of things are being discussed and are happening with that, but it's going to take time to grow that as well.
But you'll be top of the heap. And carry the torch. That's all I have to say to you. I've worked in some awful, awful, awful places. Do not become a product of your environment. Stay above, and the industry will come to you, because we are heading in this direction. Exercises medicine is here to stay, and these two things are going to come together, and you'll be top of the heap. Yes?
Can we discuss questions regarding clinical exercise physiology?
No, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
I'm in a crossroads at this point. I'm an exercise physiologist in cardiac rehab. And 5 years ago, there's a lot of things I could do I'm not allowed to do anymore. And there's a lot of gray areas, and I would like to find out what other people are doing. For example, I do exercise stress tests, and I'm frequently on a training PG. The physician is out of eyesight of the EKG, so he's depending on me to keep an eye on him. And I work in cardiac rehab, and now I'm no longer allowed to monitor EKG. Then the licensed professional has to do that. So in cardiac rehab, all I'm allowed to do is exercise, blood pressures and that kind of thing. But when I do another job in another area of the hospital, all of a sudden I can magically do EKGs. So, and I'm, I ACLS every couple of years, I get my certification with that. So you have to know EKGs with that. So it's evolving, I guess, and it's not easy.
Can you do a quick rephrase of the question?
So what she was explaining is that one of the challenges that she's facing as a clinical exercise physiologist is that her her parameters are being pulled back, and there's things that she used to be able to do, such as cardiac stress testing and things that she's not allowed to do in the cardiac rehab setting any longer. However, if she goes to other areas of the hospital that may have other types of supervision and things, you can still do some of those skills. And so it's a frustrating piece for you in your facility. Is that correct? So I do think that there is a challenge out there, and those are always going to be somewhat system specific. So you have a scope of practice that you can do, but your institution now has said, well, we're only going to allow you to do this. And so now you're into this whole issue with your institution. And certainly they're the ones carrying the liability insurance for you and those other things. So once again, I think it's educating them. It's helping them to understand what you can do, what you're trained to do. I think there's resources we could help you with for that to try to get you doing the things that you can do. Because there certainly are clinical exercise physiologists that are independently doing cardiac stress testing and other things out there. It is within the scope of training that you have to do. Pete, you were going to make a comment in that.
Just kind of going along with all that. First of all, thank you for doing this and all of this. It's wonderful. Appreciate it. Lady over here, I think that's the point right there. Because the new guidelines are going to be coming out more or less next year, that division. And it's not against our scope of doing what this young lady is saying. So it's not something we should be doing. And it's the problem with facilities that don't keep up with the guidelines. And in fact, when you pull a lot of hospitals and rehab facilities, a lot of them don't care about ACSM. And I think that collectively that's going to be an important thing going forward, the education piece to the healthcare providers in the hospitals, because it really is best practice for them to be hiring exercise physiologists that can do these things. And it is our scope to do that, but I think the education piece, it goes a little beyond just exercise as medicine, but I think it's kind of sort of a shortcut for a lot of healthcare facilities and hospitals and rehab programs that they're not tuned that way. And there are some church issues there with other professionals that also maintain claims to rehab. And that's a very facility-run facility that Emily is talking about. And the best thing that can be done is to perform excellently, prudently, to do a great job, and educate the employers about the importance of what they do. So I think it's more of a lack of understanding of the result.
So Pete was sharing that there is a lack of understanding out there in a lot of different hospital or medical facilities as to what a clinical exercise physiologist can and can't do, or other health and fitness professionals, and what their scopes really are, what that training is. It takes a lot of education. It also takes taking the high road and doing a really excellent job at what you do and earning that credibility within that. I think this is something also that ACSM can help with. I know the CCRB's had some discussions around marketing. We've surveyed employers trying to really find out how they look at the profession and things, and I think there's things coming that ACSM will try to do to try to help you educate the employer world out there as what the things are that you can do with the areas that you work in. But certainly it's always going to be an organization to organization decision, and that's one of the challenges that we have.
But to that point, I guess one of my questions or concerns would be when you're working with general population in a health club that is a for-profit health club that isn't a health facility or something like that, where at the end of the day they just want to make the most money, so they'll hire the person who has the most charismatic personality sometimes and doesn't care about education. How do we, as the educated people with ACSM and those who really believe in this knowledge and staying within your scope of practice, help these health clubs and the consumer? Because at the end of the day, the consumer doesn't recognize or realize the difference between an ACSM certified and an IFFA certified personal trainer, which is a really sad part of our industry and our world. So how do we, as those who are out there in that side of everything, try to not only educate the facility but the consumer as well.
So the question and the comment is that out there, not only do we have our clinical profession, but we have health and fitness facilities where the focus really is on making money, and they almost don't care about all the things that we're talking about. The consumers are not real knowledgeable. They don't know the difference between the trainer that got their $10 certification and the one that has an accredited certification from somewhere like ACSM. So what can we do to try to improve that picture and try to raise the credibility out there across the board? So I'm going to turn to my panel and say, Ben, what would your comment be back on that? I'm putting him on the spot because he's been too quiet.
Awesome, thanks, appreciate it. It's a very good question. You know, I hate to say it, but you almost have to market your skill set to that health club or the populace, and I know that's not, you know, an awesome answer at all, because we shouldn't have to do that. People should know, you know, that we have a certain level of knowledge in what we can do. But, you know, if you're going to a facility, you know, maybe making them aware of what it is that you can do and what it is that you can safely do may be a way that would make you more attractive than somebody else that just is really peppy or something like that. Sorry, it's not a very good answer, but I don't, that's, you guys have anything better?
It's a realistic answer.
Do you have a comment for that?
I think you can have knowledge and charisma, though, right? So, yeah, so, but it's always, you know, it's about selling yourself, and, you know, we need to do a better job, I think, in educating the consumer to appreciate, to appreciate all that we do to be credentialed, and not only that, I mean, it's the passion. It's not about, you know, a degree or a credential, but it's also to have that passion and the caring. So you've got to put that package all together and then sell that. So I think if you have that and the charisma, then you got the job, right?
It's not necessarily getting the job. It's, I mean, so here's a prime example. I work at a club of 30 trainers. One of my clients came up to me one day and said, they were looking at our board of credentials and said, Summer, you are only one of 2 people who has a master's degree in exercise science. Why is that the case? And you're only one of 10 who has any exercise degree background. And I said, that's just the situation of our club, and we're going to hire anyone. But the downfall is I don't necessarily, the club doesn't treat me any different than the person who has a high school education. And I can get my clients, and I can be as charismatic and passionate and everything I have. But at the end of the day, they have to pay more for me, so why would they go to me versus that other person?
Right. So why pay more when you can get the job done with someone less credential who has a good personality is the question, right? And that is going to be up to the individual who's doing the hiring. A lot of my students, I teach at the University of Rhode Island in the Department of Kinesiology, and a lot of my students will ask me, you know, about certification. What's the best one? What should I do? How should I? And to be honest, I don't have the answer other than, you know, I believe in what ACSM stands for, and I believe in, you know, staying within the scope of practice. And so that's really all I can say without really starting to say, you know, this is the way you have to go. But the reality is when we get out there in the real world and someone's going to hire you and they have a different certification, they might say, well, mine's the one I want, you know. And so that is where we're still growing, we're still young. And I say hang in there and just, you know, keep walking the talk. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Pete.
No, I think another thing is other allied health professions are already built and people are coming to them. We need to kind of continue to help build the profession and do that by excellence one client, one patient at a time. But I think that just to answer some of your questions, I think that one of the things that will help is for people in some of these facilities that feel like you do and everyone else in the field, get involved in the ACSM and volunteer with the CCRB, as everyone else here is doing now. I think there's nothing better than an educated employer. It starts with us. We sort of need to be that person. You know, so getting involved with the ACSM on some level puts you in the best position to be a change agent and to get the buy-in from the employer. So I would encourage you and everyone else here to get involved with the ACSM in some shape or other. That really puts you right where you need to be. I really honestly believe that. Tell my students the same thing. I believe it.
And so, in summary, volunteer with ACSM.
Well,
No,
so
and
you'll be here next
I agree with
year.
Pete. I mean, that's the way, that you can definitely help is by giving your time to ACSM. It's a very rewarding experience. It's also at times very time consuming, but we're here for you guys is really what we're here for, and to support you as well as support the populace and make sure that they're safe. But giving your time is one way that you can contribute to this kind of movement.
And you will be surrounded by like-minded individuals. And then you're not the crazy person, because that's how you feel now. It's like I'm the only one. When we have that support of the community that you trust, now you can go about your day and understand that this is your foundation. So it really will help you to have a community that you can turn to. You had a question.
Yeah, so I've been ACSM certified personal trainer for 8 years now, and I also have a bachelor's degree. So does that mean now that I can apply for a different EPC or with the CEP with the bachelor's, and I've been working for 8 years with it, so am I going to be promoted, or what? Am I still a certified personal trainer?
Yep. You're still, so even though you have the bachelor's degree, because you have the CPT certification, what you do still falls within that scope of practice. So to be able to do what the EPC would do, you would need to take that certification and become certified. Yep. Yep.
So where I'm from, massage therapist, I have a license in the state of New York. Is there any hope for fitness professionals and studios for that to happen presently?
Repeat the question.
So I believe I heard the question correctly, that you're from a state where you have to be licensed to be able to work, your massage therapist, to practice massage. And is there any hope that the exercise professionals are going to go to licensure? And currently, we have one state that does have licensure requirements, and it's a state-by-state issue. There's a couple of states that have been pursuing that, and it's very, very challenging. If we look at our clinical certifications, our clinical exercise physiologists, our registered clinical exercise physiologists, we're relatively tiny. There's not very many of us. There's about 1,500 of us across the United States. It's not a big enough land mass to move anything. And when you break that down to just a state level, like the state I'm from in Montana, we're talking about a handful of people. So to push licensure through is going to be very, very challenging to get that through our legislative process at this time. One of the reasons for the name change for the health and fitness instructor to the exercise physiologist is we really want to grow this pool and create this bigger profession where we have a lot more professionals and the opportunity to move that forward. So that was one of the strategies of doing that. And I do think that licensure will be something that's sitting out there to be approached in the future. I think you might see some movement in a couple of states, but it's going to take time to move that forward from that standpoint. So not something that's going to happen overnight. It's a long-term process. There's a lot of dynamics that go around that, and it's a state-by-state issue. We can't just do it nationally at this point in time.
Well, one thing I was thinking is that the language of certification level 1, 2, and 3 would be a point of discussion to give to the organization that you're working for, to say that I have these skills to address 1 or 2, but we don't have the skills to address 3. But then also that's a point of conversation to refer back to a physical therapy program or site or a wellness. So it creates that discussion between systems. And the more you can get that discussion between systems, then it's easier to define how important you are, because
So what he's saying is that if you can educate the systems or the different employers out there about the different levels, I think you're talking about exercise as medicine in the level 1, level 2, level 3 credential, or the different credentials that we have here, is really helping them to understand what you can and can't do, and then who you might refer to if something is outside of your scope. And also remembering that each of those other professionals have a scope of practice. So physical therapists typically aren't very good with cardiometabolic. It's an area that they're not really well trained in, except for a few of them. And there's many of them that will admit that. And there's dietitians that they're not trained in exercise. We have nurses that really aren't that strong in the exercise world. And so that's really where we have to start. I think collaborating more and working as a team and building relationships and getting our clients to the right person so they can get the guidance and direction that they really need. And as we do that, that increases our credibility as well and begins to move that profession forward. Pete, let me take the one in the back first.
I'm just kind of going back to the nutrition and making sure that, as a personal trainer, also a PT manager, that myself or my personal trainer can go in and out of their scope of practice. But I've been experimenting with some of the new software programs that are out there, like Trainerize or PT Minder, and some of them have actually tied to a nutritional online software program, Evolution Nutrition, that offer as an add-on nutritional consultation and many meal plans. So I've been very wary of branching out to actually adding that on as part of Trainerize or PT Minder, just because I'm not sure of whether we're credentialed or not as far as actual dietitian. So I'm just curious to know if you guys have thought about that as far as scope of practice as certified personal trainers utilizing programs like that, and how is it that we can maybe validate those sorts of programs that are out there?
You want to take that, Penny?
I think so just to repeat your question is that there is software out there from the nutritional standpoint that can pretty much diagnose and provide a diet or a therapy plan for different individuals around that nutrition profile. And is that something really that our personal trainers should be using? Have we thought about how that fits into the scope of practice? Is that pretty much what you were... So.
I guess the plan is, like from this Evolution Nutrition, I think that's what it's called. I guess I haven't really touched it much. But the plan is that those programs, those meal plans are coming from actual dietitians and qualified professionals. But how is it that we validate that?
Right. So I think you have to be very careful because those programs are also subject to licensure in certain states. And I know of at least one case out in the literature where someone who was not a dietitian created a program and patients in a state started using that, ran into some problems, and they ended up getting into pretty deep hot water. So I think that if you're directing people to go to a program and you're, pretty much prescribing that for them, I would be really careful as to which ones you use and digging in. There is so much information out on the internet today, and it's just flooding our society and what's credible and what's not. And so when we send clients or patients to get that information, to use that information, especially if it starts leading them down a path of a diagnosis or a treatment, I think we have to be very careful where we send them and make sure that we do know that that's credible and that that's going to be okay. If not, I would totally shy away from that, and I'd find a real live dietitian to refer them to. Yes?
Just touch on briefly, piggybacking on the licensure comment. Is there any kind of tie-in, or I guess more or less, what's the future of the U.S. reps registration that's starting to occur? Is that kind of a hopes of registering personal trainers as a whole nationwide, or is that kind of foreseeing future licensure in the plan?
To be honest.
Pete, you had a...
Well, that's what I was going to mention, was bring up U.S. reps. And, when I was speaking with Tracy Rush from the certification department, the purpose of that is to try to unite the certifications a little bit more. I think we were talking about that a little bit with NOCA and ICE, but it goes that is it's sort of a registry to sort of help educate the public and the employer as much as it is to attract the fitness professional. But what it really is just a grouping of a certain number of certifications that have achieved ICE or NCCA accreditation. And how it sort of works is the goal of it is to try to educate basically employers and the public about certification and about scope of practice and the benefits of only working with people that fall within that cohort. That's as I understood the main purpose of that registry is to bring people together that have been, defined as being at least minimally competent within that professional scope, and then to try to match people that need those services with people that are in their geographic location. And that's really the main, as I understand it, the main purpose of that.
Right, so the CCRB, I don't think is targeted on getting broad licensure for all personal trainers. Our focus really is on the degreed professional. We feel that that's a really important piece out there, and that we really want to be pushing that within our certifications and in getting, upping the quality of people that we have out there that can work with the different clienteles. So that's not something that's on, I think we're trying to unify groups and make sure that we push that accreditation to a higher level, and we're really providing that scope of practice in a high quality way so that we can earn that trust of the profession out there, from the consumer side, from the employer side, from the medical provider side as well. But our target right now is not on this massive licensure for all personal trainers. And I think that's a really muddy and slippery slope at this point in time.
Just actually work closely with CRAP, which oversees U.S. reps. I'm currently the chair of the content committee, and we're tasked with really increasing awareness among exercise professionals about the United States registry. And its purpose at this point is really to serve as a clearinghouse so that consumers and employers and other stakeholders can verify the credentials of people who claim to be certified. And it is open to all fitness organizations that offer NCCA accredited certifications, but currently there's just 7 member organizations, one of which is ACSM. But it's one step forward to try to promote the recognition of well-qualified exercise professionals. And it also, CREP as a coalition, provides a unified voice for issues like industry regulation, licensure bills, and things of that nature as well. So the organizations that are currently a member of it are all trying to advance recognition of well-qualified exercise professionals like those who are here at this conference.
Great. So what Michael was sharing is that the CREP that's out there now, that there's about 7 organizations that are consisting of that group, and their real focus is getting good information out, educating, helping even the consumers understand what's out there, and really trying to unify that higher level professional. And over time, we hope that will grow, that more of the quality organizations will become part of that, and it'll start pushing that our profession forward.
Our first stage was actually to help increase awareness among the exercise practitioners, which is what we're currently working on. The next phase is to educate the employers, because that's really where the success is going to lie. If they're not using the registry to verify who is certified and who is not, then it really doesn't help the next target audience, which is the consumer. At this point, we're still trying to increase awareness among us, the professionals in this room, and those who are certified by one of the member organizations.
So Michael was sharing that their first focus really was on educating all of us as professionals and making sure we really understand that. The next target is getting out into to the employers and that group, and then eventually to the consumer. So there's kind of phasing through that right now, and finishing up pretty much on the professional side and starting to move more to the employer side. Yeah. Good. Well, I really appreciate you taking part of your evening, skipping dinner to come in. And now I hope you all go out for an exercise session and enjoy that warm weather out there. We'll hang out up here if you want to come up and talk. Thank you.